I was out in Virginia, there was a goldsmith who, two ladies who own a shop out there, and it's funny because I interviewed with the owner of the shop, but it was her partner. She was there on the Saturdays that I was usually on the shop on the weekends, and it was Elizabeth's bench and Susanna's bench, and then mine was right in the middle. And so I could kind of look left and look right and ask somebody a question, depending on who didn't have their hands, full or something on fire. And so I got to hover over their shoulders and ask all the questions, and I'd bring them weird pieces and say, I don't know how to cast this. Because in these flasks, you can see all the little parts have to have a way to get the metal to them.
Okay. And
so you have to architect sprue so that the metal will reach the piece inside the flask. And if you've got texture covering 95% of your surface, there's nowhere to put a sprue on it.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes gravity's not your friend either, so you have to figure out how to architect the thing. And that's something I just didn't know until you keep doing it enough. All these pieces, I'll take one of these flasks apart so you can see it. They're really cool. And this is pretty straightforward. Some of these pieces are really elaborate, so it's a lot harder to get a sense of how it works. But this clear wax right here is the earring. And there's 4 of them jammed in there together so that I can make the most of my casting process. And each earring has a little pink wax sprue that also goes to it. And so every single piece I do starts out as this wax model. And these pink lines are going to feed the silver, into these earring parts at the bottom. What I do is cover this with a flask, and then I pour plaster in the top. And then when the plaster sets, I can break the bottom off and put it in so that, the whole face is down, and all the wax will melt out. Put it in the kiln for about a couple hours at 500, then a couple hours at 800, and that just kind of ashes out all the rest of the wax that's left over. And you ramp it up to about 1200 degrees, because 1650 is where silver melts, and you want the flask to be as hot as it can be without breaking the plaster down.
Wow.
So then it sits there for a couple hours too, and once it's saturated in about 1100 degrees, 1200 degrees, you can pour the metal into the hole left behind where the wax was in the plaster. They call it lost wax casting. You will always lose the original wax, and then to get your silver out of the plaster that you had, you have to chip the plaster out, so you don't have a mold left either. Everything's always a one-shot deal. It's kind of all or nothing. So when it works, it's great. Sometimes a piece won't cast fully. It'll cast, maybe 2/3, or the metal seize up before it gets all the way through the design. And you're like, well, that would be really cool if I'd planned that. Maybe I will next time.
Right.
Everything it kind of promotes its own innovation. How can I save that piece, or what can I change? A lot of times I'll get like a small bubble, and so it creates a bulge where there shouldn't have been something. There'll now be a knob of silver, and sometimes I can set a stone in it, or polish it, or add a few other things and solder some stuff to it. So I have a nice setup there with lots of different torches.
Right.
A lot of it's actually recycled. For a long time I collected sterling silver spoons and things like that to melt them down, or especially if they were in bad shape. I know a lot of people will get like little silver baby cups and stuff that eventually end up with like little chompy teeth marks all the way around the edge, or kids are apt to throw and bang them and break them or whatever, and so those are parts that you can just scavenge, or sometimes, of course, some of them I can repair if I like the pattern, or I know like the sterling silver spoon rings were a big thing, and people would just take the pretty ends and then do nothing with the bowl shape on the other side. They'd sell them for scrap, so you could take the bowls and bits and parts that people weren't going to use and move them down. I get up and moving around 11 or 12, and then hit the studio by about 2 o'clock. A casting process, from the minute that the plaster gets wet, everything else there is set. Your day is fixed. Because it takes about an hour for the plaster to set. You have to, within the next half an hour, you have to get the sprues off and get them into the kiln. And you have to ramp the kiln up over about a 6-hour period, then let it soak for another hour. And then once it's hot, you have to go. And so from beginning to end, you kind of got the tiger by the tail, and you're stuck in your studio for a 9-hour block of time.
Wow.
There's no way around it.
Yeah.
Some people can get, fancy digital pyrometers and other things to control the kiln, but that's really not the worst of it. It's just checking on it, making sure everything's okay. I don't want to turn my back on something that's sitting there at 1200 degrees.
Wow.
Once you do that, you're kind of, like I said, you're sort of set, and then all the pieces you have to grind, clean, polish. And then all of these beakers and whatnot, all that's for rhodium plating. Rhodium is another white metal. It's a platinum group metal, and it's really hard. It's what they do the white gold all the time. And so I rhodium plate the silver pieces so that they don't tarnish. So it's, you know, like I said, once you get going, it's at least, I don't know, probably about a 12 to 18 hour investment in every piece. Like I said, I can try to do them in big batches to maximize my time. It feels good. I got started doing, you know, the metal work and stuff out in Virginia, but I gotta say it's a lot easier trying to make a career of it here than out there, because they don't have, you know, the kinds of Kentucky crafted and tourism and arts boards to help you get your foot in the door.
Mm-hmm.
That's the kind of place where you always feel like you're paying your dues and doing, like, you know, the high school shows and the weekend fairs at the park, and maybe you'll get to jury into a show, and then maybe from there you'll get some wholesale accounts, and it takes a really long time to build it up. When, I mean, I have this, I mean, even at the time, I mean, it's still evolving, but I knew I had several, you know, collections worth of you know, jewelry, and I had these wholesale lines and retail lines, and I knew where I wanted to go, and looking at the prospect of doing it out there, it's like, oh, that's going to take a long time.
Yeah.
But out here, you know, with Kentucky Crafted and also the Kentucky Guild, both of those are great for, you know, getting connected and getting to know people that you need to get to know.
Yeah.
If you know that you're going to make a full-time career out of it now. There's a bunch of really generous people. I mean, even people that you would think would be my competitors. No way. My first year at Kentucky Crafted, and, you know, they're talking kind of, you know, about my price point versus what they sell down at the show. I'm like, well, I think I can do it. You know, I just have to reframe some of my wholesale lines and find out ways to work faster, like putting as many earrings in a flask as possible and things like that. It's like I can make more and work just as hard. And so instead of having things that were, you know, $100 to $200, I could move it down to like maybe $40 to $80, and that's a much more comfortable price point for just about everybody, because I think about what I'm willing to spend, you know, without really thinking about it at a show. And I'll take maybe $50 with me, $100 if I'm feeling, you know, fancy, or if I've got some gifts that I know I need to buy. And so I was like, well, to accommodate as many price points as possible, I just need to work faster. And that's, like I said, the multiple pieces in a flask. Instead of producing just 9 pieces like that, like 1 per flask, because that's as many flasks as fit in a kiln at one time. Instead of 9 pieces, anywhere from 20 to 30 I can fit all at once now. Just a matter of learning how to condense. Because it's really nice to have people who are eager to promote your work for you. You don't have to push and wheedle and sell so hard, because that's not what I do. I'm like, the jewelry making is what I do, and I hope people love it, you know, on its own, rather than me, you know, having to be all elbow rubby and say, so, I know a friend of a friend who said you'd be interested. I do that so well.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's just easy. There are people who are eager to have, you know, handmade, well-made, interesting, unusual craft, and when they see a market full of it, they're eager to be there. And like I said, they work double time to make sure that they're promoting their artists really well. You know, once they get them in their gallery, they're happy to have them there, and they want them to do well too.
Yeah.
I would say follow every happy accident, because that's how I got here. There are some really gorgeous textures that came about because I was trying to obscure a smudge or a thumbprint, or like I said, I got a bubble in a casting where I didn't expect it to be, and you can always grind it down to be the thing you intended. You know, if you want to work hard, you can push the metal around and boss it, but if you're willing to see what happens when something organic or unexpected occurs,